Ladies and gentlemen, as I learned that we have a very charming lady today with us, which was used to a box promoter, I'd like you to welcome in the attitude of that very, very famous gentleman with the white hair combed up like a fowl. I don't know a peacock. Fantastic viewing.
King.
Thank you. In the left corner, we have, from my perspective, down Liz Miller. To her right, Mr. Marshall Lager. Above on the right, Thomas Wibbenite. And, me, somebody who's just talking city stuff in the moment. And I'm enjoying it. Yes, you have views through my garden, non-existing, but a really cool fake. And we welcome the Alps again, and it's absolutely cool to see what Liz has in her background. And this is the bridge I built to, as I have introduced you not properly enough, Liz, it would be my greatest fun to welcome you to our show. And please introduce yourself a bit to the audience, such as they are burning out of curiosity. What is your background?
I can introduce me too if you want to. The burning curiosity. I love it. Well, first of all, thank you guys so much for having me on. It's so lovely to be here. I love seeing the three of you. We don't get enough chances to actually just chat and kind of, virtually hang out. Hopefully we'll get to do it again in real life soon. But hi, everyone. This is Liz Miller. I am a VP and Principal Analyst over at Constellation Research. I have the distinct pleasure of covering kind of this really wild and crazy world we refer to as customer experience very broadly. If we break that down into what my major and minor is, I would say that my major is in marketing. So I, for, almost 30 years now have been a functional marketer. So that has been where I have been. Into that. Yeah, I know, but where I've been wasting my time. We can talk about whether I was in the coloring in department, whether I was in, all of those things, right? But I also do cover, that team sport aspect of CX. So I get to talk about sales, I get to talk about service, and then I take a really crazy, funky left turn, because for those of you who know Ray Wong, our founder and one of our analysts over at Constellation, he is all about letting us take the freaky left turn. I also cover security. Because I do firmly believe, I know, poor Ralph is like, no.
Ralph, he just got excited.
Yeah, I am Mr. Security.
Yeah, Marshall's like, what in the world? Like, what in the world is happening there? There's an often overlooked intersection between security and engagement, right? So whether it's marketing, sales, whether it's service, the entirety of CX, if you were to go in and ask a CISO, like, if there was a team or a department that you would like to stick in a box and never allow out again, it would probably be marketing, right? Because we are constantly going out with our credit cards and buying these little SaaS tools that collect that awful thing data. We're just going around. We're running a data decathlon. We think that if we can collect the most of it, like, we're going to get a prize at the end of the day. And we don't ever stop and ask the CISO, like, should we be thinking about data security and like governance and like total lineage? Yeah, pish posh, right? So I talk a lot about what I refer to as brand security, which is that intersection point between all of the promises that we are making through all of our sales communications, through our service communications, through our marketing communications, and the potential of breaking the biggest promise of all, which is, if you give me your data, I won't do something bad with it, right? So the worst thing we can do with a customer's data after we've asked them to give it to us is allow a criminal to go do something really bad with it. That is brand security, right? It's not, that wasn't the blue you were supposed to use. It is, I made a promise, right? And me as the brand, I made a promise to you, the customer. And security and IT is the vehicle that allows us to make sure that we are fulfilling that promise. And so that means in a world, in a tech framework of brand security, the CMO, the CIO, and the CISO needs to look at a unified framework around the promise delivery and the visibility into our tools and systems that allow us to follow through on that. And so I always tell CMOs, listen, get up right now, go pick up the phone, go initiate a Zoom, go on to Slack and create a chat, and go ask your CISO, what do I do that drives you nuts? And how can I help? Like, those are the two questions you need to ask to have the ultimate brand security conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, is it usually the other way around? That
It's usually the CISO.
Asked as can you stop this thing that drives me nuts?
Yeah. Yeah, it's usually the CISO, or it's the two people that everyone in the organization hates getting a visit from, right? Debbie and Bob from Risk and Legal. You know them, right? So it's Debbie and Bob, right? They come down and they're like, you have to change all the words because we now need a forward-looking statement slide on, like those two, Debbie and Bob from
Twitchy.
Risk. Right.
Debbie and Bob. Okay.
Debbie and Bob from Risk. Like every organization has them. And what ends up happening is, because it's usually Debbie and Bob from Risk that come in and have that conversation with the CMO and the CISO never have that true opportunity to align. What helped us align, interestingly enough, was actually GDPR. Right?
Hallelujah.
Right.
Our export article. Yes.
the greatest German export. Yes. GDPR. We did it.
I thought Mercedes was the greatest export, but
right. I was gonna like
for Salesforce,
there's
not
a lot
for the
of
rest
food
of the
I
world.
would like to thank Germany for. Like, thank you for a Schweineschnitzel. I'm in, right? But I think the reality is that with GDPR, there was, once the regulation was passed and we knew there was a date, the CISO and the CIO kind of immediately came together to try to figure out, okay, what does all of this mean for our systems and our tools? We've got to create this department. We've got to create some crazy email address that people can go and tattle on us. There were kind of the functional things people needed to do. About 6 months before implementation date and execution date, CMOs were all of a sudden like, wait a minute, you're going to do what to our email lists? whoa. Like, what, GD, what, huh? And all of a sudden, marketers were like, whoa, this is really going to mess us up. And so that was really one of the very first conversations where the CIO, the CMO, and the CISO got together and created a shared budget and shared priority list to kick that can down the road, right? It was no longer, oh, well, that guy needs to go handle it. She needs to go deal with it. This needs to come out of her budget or his budget. It was all three being like, okay, what do we go do? And really smart digital partnerships out of that created ways to say, okay, it's not just about compliance. We've been talking about doing this, with our data so we can actually do personalization. What if we actually called that our GDPR strategy and we actually went and implemented it, right? And so the three together, because they came up with a strategy that allowed for that robustness of security and governance and privacy around GDPR, we're actually able to get some really great things done and deliver on all of those personalization promises that we marketers have been giving people for, decades now. We were able to kick that down the road. And the board said yes, because it was all three coming together. We weren't going in and asking for piecemeal things. What a great lesson to learn, right? It satisfied all three goals and everyone went in together on it. Now, right after that happened, we all went on our separate ways and we forgot that everyone had those conversations. And now we're like, CCPA, oh God,
What do these letters mean?
Oh, the letters. I mean, this shouldn't confuse anyone in marketing or in technology, right? Like, we're a world of alphabet soup, Marshall, right? Like, GDPR shouldn't have confused everyone, considering that like half of marketing sitting there like, what's the difference between a CDP and a DMP? And do I really need it along with my CRM? And they're like, aren't all these letters interchangeable? Can't I just go and do the whole thing with this one? I bought this whole platform over here. Doesn't it do all of that? And what about a snowflake? So it's all over the place.
Well, now that you brought in those funny acronyms, what is the difference?
Oh gosh, yeah. So, God, now you guys are really getting me into it. We're really going to have to really going deep now. Okay.
We are not here to make you a funny and an easy life. We are here to ask the tough questions.
Okay, I'm just going to have to take a big swig of coffee then.
This is fair enough, as long as it is not vodka, because I would be concerned that then after an hour of drinking vodka, it could get a bit tricky.
Yeah, listen, I'm part Irish and I'm part Korean, so I would have turned red, but I can drink all day. Like, let's do this. Like, come on, let's go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll be careful.
So you are looking forward to, before we come back to the acronyms,
yes.
You are looking forward and going into the wilderness of a beer fest like München or something like this to have a real testing how strong your DNA from your
my
ancestors
heritage
is.
Yeah. Well, I've since learned, thanks to the ancestry.com, the spit test. So for all of my life, in all of my father's life, I might say, my father was the president of the German club throughout high school. He was very proud of being German, right? Very proud of being German. And when he went to college, also was the president of the German club at the University of Washington. Go Huskies. And then like, even when we went to Germany, he was like, this is the Miller crest we need to get, not those silly ones from England. We're not English, right? We had to get the German one. And okay, great. Sure, Dad. And then I did the spit test. Yeah, I'm not German. Like at all. Apparently, like, we're not in any way, shape, or form German. We're Dutch, which apparently means I just have to be really mean to everyone. From what I understand about what all Germans have now told me. Well, if you're Dutch, you're not nice like Germans. You have to be mean like Dutch people. I'm like, oh.
And grow lots of flowers.
Okay. So, and the thing I love about going to Munich, Ralph, is the chestnuts. I love going in the winter. You can go in the Christmas market. So I just go in the Christmas market just outside of the old town, and I just get a big bag of chestnuts and walk around, maybe get some pretzels. Oh no, I'll do it up. I'll do it up in Munich. Don't worry about me.
Well,
that's cool.
Munich is not Germany anyway, so that's something else.
Okay, if we come back to the Kingdom of Bavaria, we are welcome also very much foreigners from all over the world and make them feel like home after they got drunk. So back to the 3 acronym abbreviation corner: DMP, Demilitarized Protection Zone, DMZ, but the CDP could be a cool topic we want to focus on.
Yes, the CDP. I'm still laughing that you called everyone not from Munich a foreigner. But anyway, so just needed to take a second there. Ooh. Yeah. So other than where the DMZ exists in marketing, so acronym soup has gotten pretty interesting. Right, because we started well, let's take a even step back, right? We started with SFA, arguably, and everyone was like, well, that doesn't work. We don't like that at all. Let's go to CRM, because building a customer relationship sounds a heck of a lot better than just enabling sales, right? Like that is Salesforce automation. That doesn't sound great. We're going to go to relationships. And then we built in this marketing automation module, right, as part of CRM, so that marketing and sales could align, right? And that was great for when CRM first, blew up. What people started to realize, especially in marketing, was that today, what we are trying to manage across the totality of engagement, whether it sits in marketing or whether it sits in sales or whether it sits in service, regardless of where it sits on CX's front line, CRM has some, shall we say, holes in its capacity to power engagement, especially in an automated fashion. And after we got through the horror of all the vendors scaring the bejesus out of us over what data was, because remember, it's big data, right? And so that scared us for about like 3 years. And then when everyone stopped being scared of big data, then it became dark data, right? And then when we stopped being scared of dark data, remember what came next, Marshall? You know what came up after dark data, right?
I think I missed
dirty data.
Oh,
remember, it was dirty. It was dirty data. Like you were like, oh, like now it's naughty. Okay, great.
Didn't we miss smart data in between?
No, we never had smart data. Apparently, never. So we went through all of that. And then all of a sudden, we were still looking at our automation tools and all of our marketing tools, thinking to ourselves, this stuff still isn't working. Like it's not, we've heard all these promises of what engagements could be and what automated and smart and AI-driven engagements and personalization could be. Why aren't we quite getting there? There's something missing. But we kept going back to CRM, thinking that if we fixed CRM, then somehow we could fix all of the personalized automation. We realized that trying to fix CRM, that was the wrong tool to try to fix, right? CRM has a purpose. And you can't go fix that or change its purpose to somehow meet engagement need. Like we were trying to we were fitting wrong things in wrong places. And that's really where CDP came from, or customer data platform, right? So the customer data platform was really intended to be the destination that could, and I hate the overuse of this word, but it is truly what it does. It unifies and normalizes data from across a multitude of endpoints or touch points that reach the customer, right? So while everyone looks at data unification as being the primary value of the CDP, it's also about the normalization. It's about being able to create a data layer that is relevant for the front line of CX, so that in real time, that front line can access the most up-to-date information that they can about their company's view of the customer, right? So that's really what the CDP is intended to do. It's intended to be the most real-time pane of glass that an organization can have, right? Now, please note that I do not use the phrase a 360-degree view of the customer.
And I'm glad for that.
thank you.
Yeah, Marshall's like
the gentleman over there, he is embracing you virtually, such as big hug. Thank you very much for not giving me that bullshit. Yeah, it
is because, listen, if someone can turn their head 360 degrees around, you're probably calling a priest and getting an exorcist, right? Like no one's meant to turn their head 360 degrees. It's just not even an owl does that, right? Like it's creepy. Stop trying to do it. It's about having the most real-time access to what you know about a customer, a segment, a market. It's not about being able to say, oh, Marshall's wearing blue today. We should send him things that are all in blue today. Like that's creepy. Stop it. That's weird. That's not the aspiration.
This is blue as well, by the way.
See, like we don't need to be sending you things that are all about blue today, right?
Yeah.
But it is about knowing when a customer is asking, raising their hand, touching a button, when the customer is in a moment, in that micro moment of need, do you, whether it is a system or a real life person, have access in that moment to deliver the best possible experience for that individual? So for service, it means, do you have everything you need to answer the question? The CDP helps bring that together, right? And without having to worry about, is the data in motion? Can I access it? It has all of the governance planes. It has all of the permissions, has everything built into it. So an organization can responsibly and in the closest reflection of real time possible, empower their people to engage with their customers in the most effective, personalized manner they can possibly do it. That's really what a CDP is supposed to be there for. It's It's not supposed to be the CRM. It's not replacing it. It's kind of fixing the dynamic a bit, right? And that's how I look at it. The CDP fixes the broken dynamic between engagement automation and the sales relationship, the transactional relationship that is CRM, right? Mm-hmm. Which is still critically important to sales, right? And to revenue generation. It is not critically important anymore to deploying emails and multi-channel marketing campaigns, right? So we have to start to right size and really begin to figure out what makes the most sense for the smartest stack for engagement, right? And the CDP helps do that. Now the other three letters, a DMP. The DMP. The DMP is really an ad tech or an advertising technology tool that helps to anonymize data and bring that into a system so that you can begin to identify and connect anonymized data into a persistent record. It is not a CDP. It should flow into a CDP, but it is not in and of itself a CDP. So all those DMP vendors out there that realize, as my watch decided to talk to me. So all those DMP vendors out there that are like, oh my gosh, the cookie apocalypse is coming and now we're not going to be able to do all the weird, creepy things that we do with cookies and oh my gosh, what are we going to be? Let's be a CDP. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't. I will call you on it every single time, right? DMPs, the technology of a DMP really has a wonderful place when it comes to the capacity to bring a full and robust picture of a segment that can be associated with a persistent record. So if I can see what all of the anonymized viewers of my website have done that match a specific type or segment or behavioral event pattern, I can then begin to make really great predictions about what my individual in that persistent record in the CDP may do, what they may want next. It helps me have a much smarter prediction to be able to deliver serviceable experiences in the time that the customer wants them, right? For a long time, we've been leveraging DMPs to spend our money better, right? We look at a DMP and we're like, oh, great, we can come up with a really smart segment. That means that I'm going to then take this DMP data and I'm going to now target all of my advertising and all of my personalized advertising buys against this data that comes out of the DMP. And I'm going to use my media mix model to be a far more efficient and effective spending machine. Again, great for the bottom line. Awesome. Love it. It's not a CDP, right? It is not the end all be all. It is not going to deliver total personalization. It delivers a piece of it and it's an important part, but it's not the whole thing and it shouldn't be confused. Like the DMP should never try to replace a CDP. Yeah. Now, here's my last comment about a CDP.
Love the term cookie-calypse. In
cookie apocalypse, right? Here's the thing about the CDP, and it's probably the most important thing and the most important piece of the descriptor that I'll use. A CDP, and repeat with me now, is not a marketing tool just for marketers. No. To think of a CDP in that manner is irresponsible. It's irresponsible as an organization to think of a CDP as just a marketing tool. A CDP should be deployed across all of your front line of experience. Everyone should be able to draw from that because the CDP is intended to be that persistent, unified, normalized record of your customer, not just marketing's customer, but of your customer. So it should be bringing in data from all of those touch points from across the lovely world of experience. And it should be deploying that goodness. And then it should be able to deploy that goodness across the front line of CX. So anytime someone comes and says, oh no, I have a marketing specific CDP.
So how can a CDP do all this? Because we are I do hear myself, so someone is feeding me.
You are the echo man out of some.
I just muted you so that I don't hear me back. So how can a CDP do all this stuff? Because we are talking several things here. We are talking privacy regulations. We are talking a lot of data collection with or without consent, talking about DMPs there. And then we are talking about the role of data governance systems that make sure that the customer record looks like this. And by the way, we also need to do some deduping and some data cleansing and this and that and whatnot. So, which to me sounds a hell of a lot like the role and the scope of systems will change dramatically, because a CDP as such collects data, feeds data, then it needs to be according to governance rules, which is the realm of a totally different type of systems. Then, one source is a DMP, which some people might look at as a subset of what a CDP does. Then we still have those transactional CRM type of systems that, in terms of when you're thinking of a suite, actually make a CDP as a subsystem obsolete, because they are one. Then we have journey orchestration, we have marketing orchestration systems. So all these have some sort and type of CDP in there. So how do you see that pan out?
Muted.
Am I muted?
Not anymore.
Okay, great. So it's a terrific question. And I think that it comes down to a real need for marketers and IT, quite frankly, and whoever is running a data strategy for an organization, to really understand what is being pulled into the CDP. And within the CDP, does the tool have the capacity to assign privacy and governance and permissions based on what is coming in and what is going out, right? So it's important when you're looking at a CDP to make sure that they are, in my opinion, I quite frankly would not look at a CDP unless it had a very strong point of view on privacy, security, and governance. I think that CDPs that are just talking about, like, I can bring in everything and I can send it everywhere, there is something quite terrifying to me about that concept, right?
Yeah, that's why we're in the trouble we're in.
Bingo, absolutely. And quite frankly, the absence of the CDP could be argued that that is what kind of brought that together, right? Because when you have lots of different outbound tools of engagement that all have different layers and definitions of what privacy, what identity, what access is, and you're just kind of having things go all over the place, and there isn't a centralized, like, think of it as like, there's lots of different things you can put in the sausage maker. There's one place the sausage comes out, right? That's kind of like what we have to start thinking of this as, right? But you need to be able to have tags and definers of, hey, what is this that's coming in, right? So I'm going to bring everything into my CDP. What is this, and to what end and to what purpose, right? A CDP isn't just a tool that is like the Ron Popeil chicken machine, like set it and forget it. Like, that's not what we're doing here, right? There has to be a strategy. We have to sit down and say, okay, we're going to pull this in. Why, to what end, for what purpose, right? There has to be answers to those questions about what we're pulling in. And we have to define permissions of where things can go when it's going out. The last thing you want is to not set up that second half of the equation so that data can go anywhere, anytime, everywhere, yay us, right? That's not the purpose of this. So when I tend to look at CDPs, and it's one of the things that I looked at when we created our first, so this is the first year that Constellation did a CDP shortlist, right? And I think one of the reasons why we hadn't done a shortlist before was really in trying to segment the difference between CDPs that were really just trying to be commoditized marketing tools to make data easier or more labelable. That's not even a word, but and then really a CDP that is trying to be a customer data platform that sits in between all of these systems of record and all of these systems of engagement and tries to give the business the capacity to define and send and create a persistent record and all of that good stuff, right? Because I think we hit the reality that not all of this data about events and behaviors and kind of transient things about the customer should fit into an IT data warehouse strategy, right? You just don't need it in there. There's just like, it shouldn't be there. But we do need it to create really effective CX experiences and strategies, right? So it has to come someplace. The CDP is a great place to have a lot of that come. I would not look at a CDP if it didn't have that privacy angle, if it didn't have that governance. And it really requires us to sit down and ask, well, why does the data need to go there? And then create that definition. So Thomas, to your point, we need to be able to have that tool that can say, yes, that journey orchestration tool, it can absolutely assign permissions and it can absolutely assign access. And we should have multiple gates across all of our systems of engagement that ensure things like consent. Our customer said, don't email me marketing materials. If we've got 5 different silos of engagement and journey orchestration and marketing automation and all these different things that we are doing, and they are all set up by different teams and they are setting things up differently, I'm telling you right now, one of those systems is going to send out a marketing email to someone who's going to get really pissed off, right? The CDP has a lovely opportunity to start to define, okay, listen, here's where permissions are. Here's where consent is. And you know what? The customer says, no, I don't want any of that. What I want is only critical communications about my account. Okay, great. Even if the journey orchestration tool says, nah, pull everything in. I've got an overzealous marketing manager running me. The CDP is going to say no, no. So I think we're getting really smart about how to protect the interests of our customer through really smart strategies where we can leverage the CDP as a primary source of, quite frankly, identity in a very large word, right? And identity poses a whole problem to a whole, raft of things, because identity means something different to a marketer than it does to IT, right?
I don't think it's a coincidence that we're finally learning how to do that, because there are now regulations in place that will cost you a crap ton of money if you get it wrong. I mean, surprise.
Oh my gosh,
we could go out of business for getting our privacy wrong.
And there is that nasty other hobby I do have. It is my favorite, such as if you...
Wait. Ralph, I can't let it go that you just said nasty little hobby that you have. And I can't get past that statement now. I'm stuck there. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's not nasty. It's his favorite hobby.
It's just his favorite hobby. Okay.
Yeah, and he's good at it.
I'm good now. Okay, we can go.
Aside of security and GDPR, I'm the guy who is always claiming I'm so open-minded to smash and crash all the silos and create a data lake. But still we have the tricky problem, or the tricky aspect. If I get together bad smelling stuff and I make a new brew, it's not a perfume. So we need data cleansing. We need data integrity. Yeah. And this is my running point, like a lasso with this swinging over my head. I do not get proper answers from the CDP drivers or the vendors how they manage it. They tell me a load of shit, such as what we have in the CDP if we are not properly looking,
Yeah, and listen, I think we've, for a very long time, a lot of people have said, no, I've got a data lake. It's called Excel. It's a big lake of nonsense that sits in a big pile of garbage, right? For a lot of organizations, we're just fighting the fight to get stuff in a place. And if we're being really honest about that, listen, when I swim in vendor land for too long, and then I talk to someone who's in this fight, it's really easy to look at them and be like, what do you mean? They have all these tools. It just automates that. It's smart. Usually it's metadata, right? right? Like it's just metadata management. What's wrong with you people? Poof, and like the magical dust comes out. But the reality is, so there's two things. I am not, and this is going to sound crazy, but what have I said so far that doesn't sound crazy? But I'm not necessarily opposed to silos, as long as those silos are intended to be centers of excellence, as opposed to impermeable walls to keep people out. I think there's a difference between establishing boundaries between systems and functional tools and playing the giant, horrible game of corporate don't touch my button, right? And you guys know what corporate don't touch my button is, right? Like it's no, I'm marketing. I got a CDP. Get away. No, it's mine. It's mine. No, I'm in sales. I have CRM. Only sales get CRM data. Get away. It's corporate don't touch my button. Because when, as a C-suite, you get into the boardroom and the board says to you, well, what did you do? Well, then you can open the wall, right? And be like, ta-da, here is all of my success. And so it's really hard after millennia of business in which corporations celebrated C-suite leaders who played the game of don't touch my button really well, to now live in a cloud native, digitally empowered, cross-org automation reality in which the game of corporate don't touch my button does more to harm great strategy that involves automation, right? Because now we're just automating we're just automating what's inside our wall around our button. So, when I start to look at these tools, and when I start to look at something like a CDP, I don't really see the CDP as being a silo buster. I see it as being a really good hole driller, right? It's like it goes up to that wall and drills the right hole, like puts in the right tube, and either sucks out or pushes in the right material so that functional group of excellence can excel and be that much better. Like, I don't need to knock down a wall between service and marketing. Service gets to have that functional center of excellence. Marketing gets to have that functional center of excellence. But, the reality is you need to have things that poke really great holes without letting all the water out, right? And I think that the CDP has the capacity to do that. Ooh, look at this. Everyone on my desk.
Yeah, this is
a long way.
For the sake of the system, too long comment. So he's basically mentioning a similar topic that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Drill a hole and come from the right angle, right?
Exactly. I mean, and Thomas, I think you're absolutely right, because the reality for something like Zendesk, and I think Zendesk is a great example of this, right? Zendesk is such a source of amazing interaction that a customer has either through automated digital channels or reflected in a real conversation that someone is having, right? Like me as a consumer, I probably have like 3 support issues solved a week, on the Zendesk platform. Like I just look up at the top and I'm like, oh, Zendesk dot. Okay, great. I know exactly where I'm going, right? I feel like I'm cheating half the time. But marketing doesn't need to have total view into what happened when Liz Miller went and solved that problem through, an automated support ticket. But marketing should probably know if I'm pissed, right? Because if I'm a really angry customer right now, if my problem isn't getting solved, the last thing that I want to see in my inbox is the survey that asks how you did, because if I'm still pissed, you're getting a 1. Sorry, suck it. And 2, I don't want to see the promotion for the thing that pissed me off to begin with, right? So when you start to look at, okay, well, what am I pulling out of my Zendesk system? If I am a marketer, what am I pulling out? I'm pulling out sentiment. I'm pulling out events. I'm pulling out behavior. Do I need to pull out the full transcript of what happened with the customer? No, right? But that is where, Thomas, to your point earlier, that is where that permission, that is where that governance, that's where the decisions about the who, the why, the what, and to what end need to be answered. And the CDP has to have the tools to be able to do it. If all the CDP is doing is ingesting and normalizing, it is not doing everything that it should be doing.
Amen.
helicopter.
How about that?
Now, looking at the whole raft and landscape of systems that businesses have, nobody's on a green field, right? So they have a marketing automation, they have this, they have that, and they have whatnot. Now, how shall they decide if they find, or some consultant tells them, hey, you guy, you need a CDP? So which more often than not happens, I guess.
Yeah.
How then shall they decide upon a matching tool? What are proper criteria?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that for a lot of organizations, it is going to come down to really taking a hard look at how your teams are going to be utilizing the tools that you have in that stack, and how the CDP then is going to either power or pull in from that, right? For a lot of, if I'm just being super honest,
we have a topic for discussion. So
Thomas wants to come and throw down. I like it.
Yeah.
I'm totally kidding, Thomas. I love your comment. But, I think that the reality is, if you are a shop that 99% of your tooling and 99% of your systems are with a single vendor, you are probably not going to be looking at a CDP from an alternate vendor. You're going to go ahead and implement the CDP that vendor has to offer, right? Because what it is doing is filling the gap and bridging some of the holes that one of those platforms or the suite players has, right? It kind of brings in that last mile and connects all of those tools and all those systems. But it does something else. It also allows you to look beyond the walls of that suite or that platform. Let's say it comes from a company that rhymes with the word schmabobi. Well, that organization does not have service tools, right? Or cloud tools, right? So that, having that persistent data, having that data layer, having that CDP, having, something that also has letters involved in it, that can all of a sudden be that great connector and that great integrator of data that comes from a ServiceNow, that comes from a Microsoft, that comes from all the different points of the front line of experience, and can bring it into that system, right? If you are a shop that has decided to really go open source and do it on your own, and you've built all these tools, and you have kind of been the cloud, integrator of a lot of tools, but whether it's your systems of record or whether it's your systems of engagement, you might want to look at someone who is maybe more experienced with that open source environment, a solution that comes from the Acquias of the world that are kind of drenched in that Drupal and drenched in that open source, coding, the folks who empower the citizen developer to kind of code from the ground up. You're going to be looking at those tools. So it really is more about, I think, the culture and heritage of your organization, how those tools came together. That's going to really start to define who you're going to start looking at. I think it also goes into who is part of your buying circle, right? If you are going in and saying, you know what, my CISO and my CIO, we're all three going to make this decision about the CDP because I'm really worried about where this is going to fit with Snowflake, with my SIAM solution, right? Let's really get crazy and bring, let's really go nuts and bring, identity and access management into this conversation from an IT perspective, right? Let's really go bonkers. You want to bring all of that stuff together.
Yep.
You're suddenly looking at a very different
foundation
solution.
Of CDP.
Right. You're looking at a very different conversation where you're looking at a CDP that maybe has more of that data history, and that, from an organization that maybe has a little bit more of that kind of identity background that has kind of rootings in SIAM. So, now all of a sudden, SAP's CDP with Gigya as its foundation suddenly starts to look a lot different than, a pure play player. So I think that it really matters on what you are looking to accomplish and to what end and who you've brought to the table. Because, it's great to look. I mean, there are a lot of really great pure play CDP players out there, and they are really, really good. And they are, but they are also going to fit very different things. And parity is very identity first. They're very security first. They're very governance first, right? They're very different than, say, someone who your Salesforce CDP, which is really going to fit like a glove with all of your other Salesforce environments. So I think it really starts to be a much bigger question.
A CDP?
Ralph just totally freaked me out with that tight shot.
Connect to Salesforce? What?
His physical Zoom engine really freaked me out there. Okay. Yeah, listen, say what we will about it. I think within that system, and I think it's still early days based on what it is today versus what we got introduced to a year ago about what it was going to be. And so I have a pretty open mind about it, to be very honest with you. I have a pretty open mind about both the Salesforce offering and the Microsoft offering, right? Because I think that they are where they started when we first started hearing about them, of we're going to have a CDP, or we're going to call it our CDP, whichever route we want to go, right? Hey, we're going to call it this versus we're going to have this. I think we're in a very different spot now that the solutions have been launched, right? And so it's interesting because when we were compiling the list for the CDP shortlist, I actually didn't include them in my consideration. I actually didn't when I drew up my list of brands that I wanted to look at. I mean, there were easily 40 brands, 45 brands on that, and 45 vendors on that list. And I didn't include Microsoft and I didn't include Salesforce because I didn't think it was fair. And I'm all about being fair, because they had just really introduced the tool, the actual CDP, as it was going to be implemented and deployed. And I didn't think it was fair to judge either solution based on what I had been hearing for the past year. I wanted to really judge the solution based on what was being implemented and what customers were actually experiencing, what customers were actually doing. And I know a lot of people, there were a lot of, let me tell you, we released that thing. I got so many emails within a 48-hour period of wait a minute, where's Salesforce? Wait a minute, where's Microsoft? And I'm listen, I want to be fair about looking at these solutions through the lens of, if my criteria are, it's not a marketing tool only for marketers, that it has a strong privacy and identity and strong data governance and lineage background. If I wrote that criteria because I meant it, not because I just thought it was a fun bullet list, right? I want to be able to look at a tool in its full incarnation and judge it against that, not what is, what might happen and what got included. Because I think with the Salesforce journey, I actually think that their journey through language brought their CDP to a really interesting place in reality. Right, because
language,
right? Because remember, 2 years ago when Mark Benioff took the stage at Dreamforce and was like, "You need a customer 360." Yeah. Well, there you do need okay, sure. I don't agree with that, but it was kind of just a proclamation, because for a lot of organizations that did not understand, I need more than a 25 degree view of my customer, right? Needing a 360 sounded like a good aspiration, especially for people who are not in marketing. Quite frankly, if people in marketing, we've been hearing about this need for a 360 for decades. So the first time we could take data and apply it to print personalization, we've been yapping about having a 360, right? It's just something that we've always been talking about. So, but I think for people who are maybe in more IT surroundings, this aspiration of this 360 total view was kind of finally accessible thanks to cloud, thanks to, advancements in data storage, thanks to, issues around governance and lineage and all of the things that are important to us that just deal with data.
Yeah, but ironically, now that it's accessible, we don't really want it.
Because we've learned we don't need it. Right? We've learned that to actually create durable, profitable relationships with our customers, we don't need everything. We need the right things, right? We need the easy button that gets us to the right bits of data. Now, arguably, we needed to go through that horrible, ugly road of trying to get to everything to learn the lesson that we don't need everything, right? Because I think that like FOMO is real, right? When it comes to data, right? Like it's real, right? Like, because if you're like, oh God, okay, now everyone in my industry is doing this. Oh, if there was that one little piece of data that I'm missing that could make me go one step farther, that's what gets me to profitability. That's a natural human mindset, right? And so we applied that fear of missing out to data, and it got us to this obsessive need to have a specific degree. But what we've all needed is a single song sheet that sounds good, right? Like we need to be able to sing as an organization and not sound ridiculous, right? Like we need that single song sheet. And those notes are made of data, right? Because the data is the personification. It's the digitization of our actual customers that sits within our organization. It is our customer in zeros and ones. And if we don't treat it like that, if we treat it like data, we're going to just keep wanting to have a 360. But when we started to think of data as our customer, well, we wanted to know what was important to our customer, when it was important to our, we got specific, right? And that's what we needed to do. Interestingly, I think that with the language question, Ralph, to your comment, it got really easy to label everything as a path to 360, right? But if you look at any of the graphics, and I always love this it's one of my favorite things about Salesforce. If you look visually, as opposed to the words they're using, look at the visuals that they use to depict the customer 360. It's all about providing the data and the systems. It's usually never a full circle, right? The full circle comes in when they're talking about their platform. But when they're talking about their customer, it's always like the semicircle of the things that are most important to that person that sits in the center. Right? Yeah. The concept of the 360 is how do we take the customer and put her in the center of this circle? How do we put her in the center so that the 360-degree view known as our company can move around her, right? It's not what do we know about her, everything we know about her. It's what do we know about our relationship with her? Like, what do we know about our dynamic with her? How do we surround her so that we can engage with her as a
Jetzt hat's den Schlag getan.
There she is gone. Well, welcome back. Welcome back. You're looking puzzled. Yep.
Hi, what happened there? That was fun.
Yeah, well,
you probably mentioned a brand that didn't really agree with your statements, and then they hit the button. Yeah.
We call this in Germany Zensur. Censorship. Bad.
You probably forgot to mention AWS and they blocked you.
Yeah, AWS is like.
Yeah, well, it's funny that we have this virtual buzzer. For the
Thomas. I absolutely love your comment back because we actually agree. I think that you should be able to see it. You shouldn't be able to use it, right? Like it's about knowing and it's about having the visibility and the transparency, but not being able to be like, oh, I see that you wrote this or you said this to your service agent. Let me send you 90 emails that use your exact language because I'm creepy, right? Like it's about, so I think we totally agree. I just used probably silly words that made it sound like we disagree, but I think you're totally right, Thomas. So
probably a terminology.
Virtual high five with you, buddy.
Yeah. I wouldn't say they should be able to see it. It should be used as an input for sending or not.
Well, I think you're right, and I think I think the reality is that when we're seeing AI applied really, really well, it's the AI that's looking at that and being like,
we have the sensor aboard again. And I'm still there. I'm happy.
You're the only one who's out, probably.
Oh no!
I see everything moving.
Oh no! This is the time that everyone gets to drink. Apparently, I don't know.
Yeah, probably we need a drink. Yeah.
Skull.
Modern technology brought to you by Alexander Graham Bell.
So.
And not glassfather, but coax cables. Yeah. But I wanted to emphasize on exactly that aspect when we were tracing back to integration. And you mentioned several providers which are very cool as CDPs, and that is their core competence, and they are not in a platform, and they are best of breed in that area, that I see the integration is so tremendously important, such as the data cleaning and data integrity.
Yeah.
And a very interesting movement we have here in European community is that they try to use the advantages of open source technology for something in research. They call it Open Integration Hub, because they take the point and view that not everybody can buy himself a muley and spend $500,000 for that muley in a blue cloud. And as muleys are slow and not too smart, sometimes one needs things which are even with a built-in intelligence. And the swarm intelligence here from the open source community is extremely helpful to get, for especially for the SMBs, something affordable on track. Yeah.
The irony, of course, being that for a lot of SMBs, they can't afford the technical talent that you really do need to run an open source.
You are
system,
right.
That can be the hard bit, right?
Yep.
And believe me, I am not one of those people that's like, no, commercialization only, open source is terrible. Like that's not what I'm saying in any way, shape, or form. I get a little nervous when it comes to open source, simply because there is a reality with open source, and the concept of one code, a million eyes, to be able to look at that and highlight errors and to be able to flag and ticket is wonderful. The thing we don't necessarily talk about a lot in open source is, yes, you had one person as the creator, a million eyes looking at it, and then you only have like 10 people taking care of all the tickets. So the disproportion in being able to build and repair is really, really detrimental in a lot of situations. And I think especially in security scenarios, if you are not an enterprise that is set up with the rigor of creating bombs when you are creating your open source coding, so that you know what is in that snippet of code, or what you went and got that open source tool and it's the foundation of the app that you built, but you don't have a bomb of what is in that root code. Well, now all of a sudden you're working around with like a 0-day vulnerability that's 10 years old, that's been rooted down in so many library layers that you don't see it. And it's going to take your systems like 5 years of observability to be able to see it. So open source makes me a little twitchy. Like I'm just gonna, like, it makes me nervous. But I do think that when it comes to having the capacity to learn and accelerate at exponential speeds, open source does really give that runway, because you have so many people pedaling the car with you, right? It is really hard to want to not be in that environment, right? So I think for organizations that want to resolve their data issues fast and get up and running fast, open source is such a great way to go. I think that for small, agile, maybe IT savvy organizations, it's pretty reasonable to think that you've probably got someone within your organization who's willing to go and just swim in code all day, right? Like, like being able to connect those tools and integrate those open tools. You probably have someone who maybe is a step in between developer and citizen developer. Like, have we come up with a name for that person yet? I don't know, militant developer. Like, I don't know what we call them.
I go more for a hybrid approach, such as if I use open source, I have a service organization outside of my company which is helping me and are the minds and the nerds I need to assist me when it's coming to a critical pass, and they are there. Yeah. And what I rely on from my experience, as I was the only idiot who wrote a guidance on open source CRM systems and published it, and it was read. So in 2013,
but it was read. Like, celebrate that. Like, someone read it, Ralph. Yay!
And the interesting aspect is that take it from there. There are some very interesting solutions, not only in the office corner, which are properly developed. And what I see is if you need to have the integration between your accounting and your CRM, and there is nobody who is helping you there, and you have to do Excel exports as the building bridge. I love to have something like a Muley, but as an affordable price to get me connected, or some magic, which is not from the good fairy mother. Yeah.
We just had an event. The event was we met the top of the hour, which begs the question: how much time do you have?
Well, I got time, but I don't know if your viewers want to keep hearing me ramble on about nonsense. They're probably hoping that Ralph like chugs something.
Well, according to LinkedIn, we didn't scare off everybody
Start that
yet.
party.
Yes. Also, well, then let's continue. Push on for a second or two.
Sure.
Yeah. So basically, you are the one who has the time limit.
Yeah. Let us know when you're done with us.
I know, right? Well, I'll just get up and leave. You know.
Oh,
that would be too hard.
I know. Well,
We
Ralph,
couldn't take that.
It wouldn't
You have
take
a
that.
microphone you can drop.
Yeah. So Ralph, I think your comment's really interesting because I think that there are tools that we think about for integration, right? And there are suites that we can buy that are for integration, and then there are tools like I always marvel at the one tool in the big blue cloud that is now labeled as a marketing analytics tool, but pre-acquisition, a lot of customers were using it as if it was a CDP because it has incredible capacity for integration, especially for ingestion of data and normalization of that data to create some pretty great intelligence and directions, and provide that integration and be able to shoot that out. And that's Datarama, right? We kind of forgot. We kind of forgot that Datarama for a lot of customers was used as a CDP prior to, well, CDPs blowing up and being a big category, right? Yeah. But I mean, when you talk to, listen, I dig Datarama as a tool. I think it is like, if you haven't seen a lot of the output from it and a lot of the data and the analytics from it, like it should not be something that is just hidden in marketing because it is a nice little analytics tool, right? Yeah. But it also does a great job with standardizing integrations. And when you talk to customers who leverage Datarama, the thing that they look at most is, I needed to take all of this data, all of this metrics, all this stuff that was coming out of Facebook, was coming out of Google, was coming out of like my website, all this stuff out there. And I needed someplace to pull it all in. When you hear them describe it, they use words like pull it all in, bring it into one place. It's integration, right? We can call it ingestion now, but what they were looking to do and the tool they needed was an integration tool to bring data together. Sounds like a CD, like if it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, And so I think we kind of forget that that's what a lot of that was. And so I think the beauty is that now you can really use that. And when you intentionally apply that to analytics and really focus that, you have some really, really interesting queries and really interesting experiments and ideas about optimization and about business that you can ask of the tool because of its integration capabilities. Right? It should not be lost that that's a terrific integration tool. When you're talking really about system integration, when you're talking about application integration, you're in mule land, right? Like that is just where you need to be in that cloud, right? Yeah. So I think it's about, again, a lot of these tools, and I think it's because it's the nature of SaaS, it's the nature of cloud. Little tools will bubble up. They get bought by big platforms. They get all like lumped in one area, but we still want to bring up those little tools. We still want to bubble them into the right places, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's about getting people to ask, why do I need it? What is it going to do? And to what end? If the to what end answer is because someone told me I needed it, it's probably not the right tool for you, right? You need to step back and have a couple more conversations. But I've heard people, I've heard people say, listen, I was finally able to connect all of these things because I stopped thinking about it as a marketing analytics tool and I started thinking about it as this. And it's that to-what-end piece. And the to-what-end always has to be around profit, revenue, and customer.
And this is our role as analysts, where we should encourage people to think again and not to believe that the Borg cube, which is coming sometimes around as a blue cloud, is knowing it all. Yeah. There were so brilliant bits and pieces which get into the big blue cloud.
Yeah.
And they do have their benefits. And it is what I like, for instance, with some other operations and organizations which play with their words, like small office, home office, but they use a Z, yeah, and they have a very clean machine room, and they have a very sensitive approach of we always should be money's worth. If we have already it in the stack, we shouldn't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
And if we can take it out of that bit and piece, we can do the same stuff. So what their BI tool, for instance, is
I love it.
creating for Magic, I honestly was flashed. And their customer lifetime tool, Magic again. Yeah. And I love these Magic come through. Yeah. And my name is not Simon, and it's not what I draw comes true, but I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know the company of which you speak, with the Z, and I think that again, it's why it's funny. So I had a piece of research that just launched today on B2B marketing automation. It's my first, and as analysts, you guys will appreciate this. It's my very first market overview, and it took me 2 flipping years to write. It's like the longest. Ooh. Right, Marshall. Marshall had the exact right expression. Ooh. Yeah, it's because I just kept getting distracted. Like I cover so much and stuff. I was like, ooh, shiny object there. And I finally was like, I gotta sit down and finish this damn thing. So 2 years in writing. But
I have to ask, so is that a market overview for 2019?
Yeah, right. And well, that's where it started. And that's the problem, right? It's because every time I sat down to write it, in B2B marketing automation, it shifted, right? Because a lot of it, unfortunately, where it was in 2019, the paper would have been 2 pages long, and it would have been called "Everything's Commoditized. Go send your emails. Stop bothering me." Would have been like the totality of the entire report, right? But because of things like CDPs, because of things around data governance, because of issues around the rapid advancement and application of AI, within a year and a half, the market completely shifted. Now, does that mean that marketing automation isn't going to be completely obsolete as a segment category, within the next year and a half? Yeah, it's getting pretty commoditized. Like, there are a lot of players out there that are like fancy email butlers and nothing more. And, but the really smart platforms are getting really smart finally. It's making that leap finally, right? But what was really funny was, when I was looking at all the platforms and when I was looking at all of the solutions, the thing that really came through was it's not about the tools and the meatball chart of function within the tool. What I found was the real difference and the real point of differentiation and conversation is the heritage of the organization. And if the heritage of the organization fits the culture of your organization, you're going to have a much better fit. Right? If you are starting greenfield and you're looking at a marketing automation tool and you as an organization believe in open source, citizen developers, business leaders should be able to create their own applications to go do things. Microsoft becomes a really interesting play for you, right? Like, you get to play with the power tools, you get to build all of these different analytics dashboards. All of a sudden, if you have a group of business users who really want to go and build that stuff, give them a platform where they can go build it. But if you're a small business, if you are a business of one, and you are trying to figure out sales and marketing, and you are trying to figure out all that, something like a Keep is great, because all of a sudden you've got a phone number that comes through the app. Like, you've got different things that are there. If you rely heavily on creative, and your marketing engine is really based off of being able to have integration across creative tools and having great, powerful CMSs and all of those things, you're probably going with Adobe, right? Like, you're probably going with those things. But if you're a small business that also wants to integrate all of your finance into one operating system, suddenly Zoho becomes really, really interesting to you, right? So it's really about that heritage. If your organization is obsessed with data and obsessed with data organization and hierarchy, if that is where you come from and you are an SAP shop, you are not going to look much farther than SAP's tools, right? Because there is not really an organization out there that understands data and data organization and hierarchy at an IT level than someone like, we made HANA. Like, the heritage of that is really important to identify and understand. And I felt that, I think we're going to see that in a lot more of these engagement tools, where it's the heritage of where the solution came from and why, and how the automation tools with the big blue cloud, community and industry really sit at the heart of why Salesforce exists, right? Yeah. Having that community that you can learn from, having specialization in industries. And so if that's the tools you're looking for, why are you going to try to go make a square peg of SAP, try to fit in a round hole of we really like community?
Yeah, it's the right tool for the job.
Right, exactly.
I've got this thing here. It's wonderful. But I'm not going to use it to drive nails.
Right. Like, you could use it as a hammer and you're going to sit there for 10 years. Like,
and I must admit that in a pinch, I have. And it's upsetting. But why make that stretch?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
A while ago, you mentioned something fascinating.
Yeah.
Which leads me into actually one of the things I'm very curious about. You said B2B marketing is kind of getting commoditized, which is fair enough. Yeah. So what I do see is that there are a bunch of processes and process supporting technologies. Let's go from the technology point of view, take B2 segmentation, B2B marketing, B2C marketing, pretty much the same. CDPs, Journey Orchestration, Analytics, Optimizing. What I do see is that they're on a trajectory that goes into a kind of a black hole. Means they will collide. Yeah.
Yeah.
This suggests that the whole market and tool segmentation that we do see right now will change. How do you see that?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think that when it comes to B2B as opposed to B2C, we used to have, especially in marketing, but I think in sales and even like service-led tools, we had this idea that, B2B sat over here and B2C sat over here. And never those two mindsets or twain should meet. And I think that buyer expectation is crumbling very, very quickly, right? Because the B2B buyer is now getting the expectation for ease of use, self-service, personalization. Those expectations are being molded by their experiences as a consumer in the B2C world, right? So it's about the expectation shift. And so in some tools for deployment, we're going to see that change. The fundamental difference, however, in B2B and B2C that still remains important in marketing automation as well as in sales engagement and effectiveness is that in a B2B buying scenario, you're dealing with the buyer and a range of influencers that really, that's where you need the intelligence. That's where you're pulling in the data. It's not market segmentation data, it's firmographic data, right? So it's not, the algorithms might code the same. It's pulling data from different sources and creating those intelligence segments and creating that intelligence in a very different output. So it's more about being able to apply the intelligence that can be drawn from the CDP specific for a B2B application than it is having a B2B CDP and a B2C CDP. That's not what we're talking about here. That is how some organizations have evolved because they've wanted intentionally to keep those persistent records and data separate. That is a data strategy. That is not a tool or technology strategy, right? So it's a different conversation. I think what has become commoditized in marketing and in part of MarTech has been this idea of like, I got an email tool. Who's got an email tool? Well, I got an email tool and it sends faster. Well, it sends bigger. And we got like, it's kind of that like weird used car sales dynamic that's happened on the individual point of engagement tools. Like, I got a social listening media tool. It's got AI. Like, it's that weirdness that's happening. And that's where I'm seeing the commoditization. And I think those get sent down to the land of procurement, and whoever's cheapest wins, right? Like, that's just what's going to happen there. So I think the micro segments within the marketing technology landscape is going to change. I think what's really changing and what's driving the change at the kind of the big macro level is marketing as a function, and quite specifically the chief marketing officer as a role has shifted from becoming the chief storyteller, right? the chief engagement officer, and really becoming the chief growth officer, right? Marketers are, and there's a great study from the place I used to work. So before joining Constellation, I used to run an organization called the Chief Marketing Officer Council. And they do great research. If you ever go to CMOcouncil.org, I still love the team over there. And Donovan Neal-May, their executive director, is still doing awesome stuff. They recently put out a study that was talking about, you know, what is that mandate and how is that mandate coming through the pandemic? And the expectation by the board and the CEO for the CMO to actually identify and realize growth opportunities has increased twofold over the pandemic, right? So everyone's looking at the CMO and being like, okay, when's that growth engine kicking in? Like, when are we starting? And the way we can get there is by leveraging these really smart tools to not only engage more effectively. So we're driving down the bottom line, we're driving down costs, right? We're being more effective and efficient at what we do. But it's also leveraging these tools like a CDP, like Journey Orchestrators, right? Like all of these different tools that help us be better at the function, at the act of marketing, at the act of sales, the act of service, everything in that CX front line. And it's also giving the intelligence so that we can start to see like, wait a minute, that's a really underserved market over there. Let's go try something. It gives us the freedom to quickly experiment and fail forward and fail fast. And it starts to open up opportunities for growth so that we can start to look at things like upsell and cross-sell. I mean, everyone knows, like, if you sell a loyal customer more, you're going to make more money. Like, it's kind of one of those moments, right? But what's the hardest thing for a marketing team to go do? Upsell and cross-sell. Because it requires and demands data that comes from other parts of the organization to be able to understand, can I upsell this customer? Maybe it's actually better to upsell in service. Maybe it shouldn't be something that's a marketing role, right? But an organization can't see that, can't know that, unless all of these functions are able to see this, be able to understand it, and can come up with that strategy as a whole. If everyone's trying to do it in a silo, you're not going to get to growth. You're going to get to intermittent spikes in revenue and opportunity. You're not going to get that consistent, lovely line of growth. And that's what marketers are really trying to do. So I think because of that shift and because of that shift in conversation, Thomas, you're seeing tools begin to kind of collapse in on themselves and segments collapse in on itself. Because you know what? Having the latest, greatest social sentiment aggregation tool isn't necessarily the hottest thing on the CMO's wish list right now.
What is?
What is? You know what? Honestly, so here's interesting. At the start of the year, I launched a study with CMOs. When I asked them what tools they were going to be looking at to buy over the course of the year, number one thing was a CDP. Number one. Everyone's looking at a CDP. But here's the interesting part. When I asked what is the one tool that you believe is going to help you reach your mandate and your goal of driving growth over the year, revenue optimization solutions.
Again?
Revenue optimization tools.
Okay.
It wasn't the CDP. CDP actually fell down to like 6th place.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to drive growth, you need to understand where the opportunity is, right? We got to go find the opportunity before we can go shoot it and kill it.
In this moment, I feel like the pupil who is listening with big astonishment to the teacher. What is a revenue optimization tool?
So it's this kind of fun hybrid that sits in the middle of all of your kind of traditional CX tools and things like sales performance and sales efficiency and engagement tools. Think like Pros. Pros is a really great example of someone that I would probably put into that revenue optimization bucket, because they have a lot of tools that range from, pricing optimization, actually like flexibility in pricing, so it, again, like think of an airlines, if you're going on a Tuesday versus you're going on a Wednesday, being able to see that flexible pricing opportunity to match your revenue potential and what your customer will support, being able to get that really smart price in there, things like that. CPQ is a great example of, a CX type tool that becomes a great revenue optimization opportunity if you don't just use the CPQ as a quoting tool, right? If you actually think of your CPQ as an intelligence point, like a point of intelligence where the customer is literally telling you what they want, and you can bring that into your systems of intelligence that drive what the next opportunity for, whether it is a lookalike segment, whether it is a lookalike customer, so you can preemptively say like, hey, this is something that you might be interested in, or you could configure your own, right? Like being able to give people those types of smart opportunities. Those are really revenue optimization tools. There are also revenue optimization tools that come out of more finance centered, where you are literally looking at your kind of what your selling costs are, what your marketing operation costs are, and really beginning to understand from a financial perspective where revenue, which is of course that profit, right? Plus what you're spending, like what's happening there. So I think that right now, to be very honest with you, revenue optimization is something that's kind of still gelling and forming. And I think every one of us and every analyst firm out there has a slightly different flavor of what it might be. It's not yet that kind of solid ground. What I tend to look at it from, though, is through that CX lens of, if I'm a marketer, where do I need to cast my line next for the most efficient possible relationship builder, so that I'm not only filling the pipeline with leads, I'm working on upsell and cross-sell, I'm pulling that intelligence from things that are giving me customer signal. That is where I am using my operations in a smart manner to drive as much revenue as possible.
Which is
I have one burning
expected that on the sales side. So this means that marketing and sales are finally getting aligned.
Oh no! Oh God, no! No, we all still hate each other.
Crazy talk.
No, it is. And it is bringing that conversation back, Thomas. And I mean, I think we can all remember a time when that was the burning conversation. It was the chapter before CMO-CIO alignment. Remember, if like we turn back the book, the chapter right before that was sales and marketing alignment. We forgot about that when we were focused on CMO-CIO alignment. We're going back to it, right? And here's what's super interesting. And I saw this loud and clear in the week that was the Oracle Salesforce arm wrestle, like who was going to come out with bigger announcements week, right? Last week was, did anyone else notice that sales was like right in the spotlight, right? Sales optimization, smart tools for sales, smart lead application. Last year was all about marketing, getting smarter about growth. Man, 2022 is going to be a rough year for sales leaders, because all of these tools, all of these big announcements are getting CEOs to sit up and be like, wait a minute, you have access to those tools. Why aren't we growing faster sales, right? Like that focus is really going to be on sales next year. And so the interesting bit is going to be, does sales have the opportunity to blame someone else? Oh, it was marketing. They gave us crap leads. Well, marketing's going to be like, we have tools. That these are really great leads. Oh no, my friend, right? So now who's next on the sales chopping block, right? Who's going to be the next? They're the reason why we couldn't do it. Is it going to be service? Is it going to be IT? Like,
it's all the CIO's fault, because they didn't implement the functionality that is needed.
Damn CIO, right? Yeah, it's going to be like, so does that mean that 2022 is the year of the sales and IT alignment conversation? It's like, does marketing get a rest in that dialogue? It's going to be interesting, because I mean, these tools that were announced last week, they really focus on sales performance. And I mean, it was like, I've now wasted an additional like almost 30 minutes of your audience's time. They're like, we got to go.
We need to do a follow-up.
I would like to get rid of that burning question. The research you were talking about, which took you some time to keep it up to date, and you are, as we excited to get to know more. Is it available for download or only for your very beloved customers?
Right now, it is just for our customers, but who knows? Maybe some eager organization out there is going to make it available for everyone to be able to download. We can, fingers crossed. But I'm going to be blogging about it a bit, so keep your eyes on the Constellation. So constellation.com.
Yes,
keep your eyes open there. We'll see some stuff coming out there. But yeah, we're having some fun with it.
And we agree on that observation about sales gets. In the moment, a lot of attention, positively thinking and prediction. And there is one player where I was teasing my colleagues with, such as let the system do the work. Yeah. So it was not too new what Oracle announced and pronounced, but the way they did it, as I honestly said to a snippet, which Brent posted, and the explanation on what is shown and where's the beef, that was something which I honestly was missing from the presenters from Oracle. So they need one of their own to get the story behind it and to make.
We'll see it in the second announcement. So that's my prediction. We'll see in the second announcement because remember, this was originally going to be the kind of the intro to engineered selling. And it was going to have both marketing and sales functionality, but they pulled back the sales functionality and they really focused in on the marketing. So it's going to be in this next announcement where we kind of see the second half of the engineered selling dynamic. And I think they did the right thing because some of the things that they want to add into that selling and into the Fusion sales portion of it, that's really where kind of a lot of the rubber meets the road moments are going to happen and where that focus on it is. So I think for them, they pulled back in the right moment. I think they made the right decision to do that. But remember, it's going to be two halves of a piece. The concept of engineered selling, though, I mean, I think what was most fascinating about that for me was, I mean, it was like Rob Tarkoff took out the knives and threw them all at CRM. Right? Because he was like, CRM is bad. Boom, boom. It was like, whoa, like, wow. Do you guys remember what you sell? Like, because there's a CRM there. Like, what? Like, it was that moment of like, don't tell anyone on the CRM team that you think it's bad. But I think that it is another pointer to Oracle as not being your grandfather's Oracle, right? It's Oracle shedding that skin of we're a bunch of products that you need Oracle to pull together for you. And now all of a sudden it is, hey, like they keep calling it Project Redwood because that's their internal language, but let's call it what it is. It's actually bringing all of their tools together so that a person doing the work can do that work better.
We are no longer Scopus. We are no longer Siebel. We don't have only old crap. We invented new.
We're Oracle, right? And I applied that. I applaud that a lot. Like I thought that was the right way to go. I liked it.
Well, we could do at least half an hour on that one, but what I was missing in the presentation, they showed the high level process, which is amazingly simple.
Yeah.
But the hard work is happening underneath. Who creates those templates? Who creates the segmentation? Where does it come from? That appeared all like magic. Yeah. So that magic they need to.
You buy a fairy godmother with the subscription.
Let me put it that way. They need to show the trick behind it because then it's what is it? It's basically the same as in a plain old marketing cloud of the other blue vendor. Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think the reality is that what I thought was really interesting was when they were talking a lot about kind of the smart decisioning and some of the tools is that it's basically Unica. Right, not Unica. I
mean, what they did is it's pretty cool to put a services-oriented layer on top of it. This is pretty cool. Yeah.
And so I think all of that is really interesting that they are really kind of fundamentally re-architecting what is platform versus what is function and what is tool. Yeah. And when you talk about that other organization that starts with a Z, they have done that very well, and they have done that very intentionally, right? They really understand what that architecture is and have that single architecture. I think, interestingly, Oracle is moving in very much a similar mindset, but at a very different scale and for a very different scale of customer, right? And I think that's where it gets really tricky. But at the end of the day, what I think we're seeing here is kind of a bifurcation of a lot of these large platforms of who is really going to work in the service of the people getting work done. And I would argue that what Redwood and what Oracle is doing is moving closer to that model where we are putting in the work so that people can get work done. I mean, I would make the same argument of the changes that Adobe is making. Right? Adobe understands the work of marketing. They understand the work of creative. And so they are putting in those intentional connectors. A lot of the things that they are doing with their acquisition strategy is really about how to put in that intentional collaboration so that work gets done. And it's done with intention as opposed to getting done by accident because teams built it themselves. And that's different. Right? That's a different way of looking at this.
Yeah.
It's also arguably where Salesforce wants to be, but hasn't quite articulated yet. I think Brett actually articulated it the best in his portion of the keynote of like, listen, we know how this is done. We're now making it a formal process. Like, he made the joke about MuleSoft, the tool that integrates your legacy systems that you like to pretend aren't there, but still are. And I thought that was the most hysterical line.
Yeah, that was historical. Right.
Trying to tell us something.
I loved it. It was great. But I think I think what we're seeing, like people, and listen, one of my colleagues here, Diane Hinchcliffe, is probably the best thinker around the future of work, right? His work around that is phenomenal. And I think one of the things and the threads that when I get to kind of listen to him talk about his research and what he's up to, one of the things that I keep walking away with is that the biggest trend in the future of work is actually about being realistic about what work is. And I think that these tools are getting there, right? It's being realistic about the work of CX, right? It's about the work of experience and how we get there. So it's not these big, like, welcome to Experience Cloud. Like, we're not seeing those moments anymore. What we're seeing are the moments of, hey, service leaders, we know how you work. Let's get you to work better. And I think that's a really important shift. And it's thanks to the pandemic, if we're being honest, right? Like, we needed to figure out how to work.
And my dream is that one day we have the sales reps which love their system and prefer to work with their systems and not clean the bathroom.
There we are.
Bingo.
From a technology point of view, I guess so that what we are seeing is exactly what Oracle does, is pretty much exactly what you hinted at. We will see a breakdown of applications. They will vanish. Into a whatever platform is, a technology platform that is exposed by reconfigurable services in order to build all those processes. I didn't write about that in my post about this event because this is conjecture. They didn't mention it with any word, basically, right? But this,
I go back to the work of my colleague Holger Mueller, or I should call him Holger Miller. I'm going to call him whatever I feel like calling him. I'm just going to call him Holger. Listen, Holger talks a lot about business acceleration clouds, right? And this world in which your data and your applications are literally going to be decoupled, and you're going to work in this far more agile, rapid development scenario where you are not dealing with your data as being wholly coupled to a single application, right? You're going to have that data layer. You're going to have those applications that sit on top of it. And I think that's really what we're seeing. I mean, Holger's been talking about business acceleration clouds for several years now. And I think that with this year's, like all of the announcements that have come in the last several weeks, I mean, he's kind of being proved right. No one's watching this, right? So don't anyone tell him that he's right. Because that kind of makes my life miserable. So don't tell anyone that Liz Miller said Holger Mueller was right about something.
My mouth is zipped.
That's really going to make him be a pain in my ass. Okay. So, but he's right about it.
And if he's buying you the beer, Fair enough.
Holger's going to buy all the beer.
Yeah. And what we found out, to put it in a funny phrase towards the end, is what we see is that knowing that it's not disclosed how the magic is done, you get with an Oracle subscription, although a fairy godmother within your system build. Yeah.
I will take that fairy godmother as long as she brings me new shoes. Like, I'll take it. Like, fine. You want to bring me a fairy godmother as long as she got some sassy shoes to go along with it, I'm buying.
Yeah, the fairy godmother does not show you how the sausage gets made.
Well, that's true. That is very true. Fairy godmother just makes the damn pasta.
Okay, I guess we can continue for several more hours. I propose we do this at another time.
You're going to have me back? What?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, sorry to tell you that. You didn't manage to scare us off.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
Good. Well, it's been lovely. And thank you guys so much for having me. I've had so much fun. And gosh, I hope for the 2 people who managed to sit through this whole hour and a half, they had a good time too.
By the way, there's still audience.
What? You guys are still here? I feel like Ferris Bueller, like coming back, being like, what are you guys still doing here? Go.
Let's hope it's not Holger that he
Holger. He's like, she said I was right. I'm going to sit here till the very end.
He just tuned in 5 minutes ago. Surprise.
That's all he heard. Holger was right.
That time.
Okay,
I love it. Thank you guys so much. And I can't wait to come back.
Yeah.
This has been amazing.
Well, it'll happen. It'll happen.
It was marvelous. It was
thanks to everyone who's still in as well. We can't say thanks to Thomas because he left.
Thomas,
was
thanks,
good comments. Yeah, was good comments.
Yeah.
So let's go backstage right now. Thanks, and see you guys who are in next time.
Stay healthy.
And
be loyal with us.